Today is the final day of the deliberations for the Supreme Court. 2 sessions today. Yesterday was about the mandate, Monday about a rather arcane tax law. But it's been interesting to watch this take place, and we wanted to get the perspective of somebody from the Senate. And we go to Senator Roy Blunt, who is a Republican from Missouri. He is a member, by the way, of Appropriations, Commerce, Science, and Transportation, and also the Select Committee on Intelligence and the Rules Committee, but joins us now on POTUS. Senator, thanks for being here this morning.
Hey, Tim, thanks for letting me be with you, and thanks for what you're doing every day. I mean, these are big issues we face as a country. I think this is one of those elections that years that you only have about once every generation that's going to say a lot about who we are for a long time, just like the Reagan election in 1980 established the parameters we worked in really for a generation. And I think this debate is equally that big and incredibly consequential. And you're out there every day doing your part to be sure that people understand what's at stake.
Well, I appreciate that. You guys are the story, though, because you're going to have to make the policy. And we have these 3 days of arguments and discussions. Then sort of things will get quiet. Then in June, likely, late June, we'll get the decision. I guess the question is this better for Republicans or Democrats if it gets overturned? I mean, what is between now and the end of this election or up to the election in November? We've got 223 days right now until the election. How does this play in the campaign for 2012 for both the presidency as well as for people who are up for re-election in the House and Senate?
Well, I think it's better for the country if it gets overturned. In my view, from the day the bill was first introduced, is that this mandate is unconstitutional, that the government can't make people buy a commercially available product and make them participate in a part of the economy that they choose not to participate in, and we'll see what the court decides. You know, I have sort of any one of the criteria should be enough. Is it constitutional? Is it a good idea? Can we afford it? And we obviously can't afford it. It's clearly not a good idea. Either one of those are good reasons not to do it, but the one that means we might not go forward with the president's plan is that the court may decide it's just an overreach on the part of the government to think you can make people do what this bill makes people do, or you can make institutions do what this bill makes institutions do.
Senator Blunt, so if assuming the court were to decide that this law is unconstitutional and that it is null and void, in other words, severability, all of those different things, what would be the Republican solution to the increasingly rising health care costs in this country? What would your idea be the best way to move forward, especially given the contentious relationship between Republicans and Democrats right now? What's the solution?
Well, I think that's a really important part of this debate. And if you allow yourself to get trapped into the trap the president would like to set, which is we can do what he wants to do or we can do nothing, those are not the two choices. And we need things like medical liability reform, a true marketplace for health care where you could buy across state lines and do other things that really make a competitive marketplace, more transparency in the health care system so you can see what people charge and what their results are, and fair tax treatment. You know, if the individual buys their insurance with their own money, it should be with pre-tax dollars, just like the biggest corporation in America buys insurance for their employees with pre-tax dollars. So there are a handful of things that would change the system dramatically if we would do that.
What would happen if this law is found unconstitutional? We already have people can now, until the age of 26, stay on their parents' health care, whether they're in college or not. We also have the portability in place. That is, you can't be turned down if you're moving from one job to another. And also, pre-existing conditions, you are still covered, given these are provisions that have already taken effect under this law. What happens to those, and what would you suggest should be done in the Congress to take care of that, unless you want to just see those rights or those now opportunities for Americans go away?
Well, that would be, of course, there's nothing in the Bill of Rights about staying on your parents' insurance till they're 26. But the court would have to decide if any of this can stand. Now, this was a bill that was thrown together in a way you should never legislate. Nobody's bill would be the final bill until Scott Brown got elected, and then suddenly there aren't 60 votes in the Senate any longer for any other bill. And so this doesn't have the normal legislative things you'd put in a final product, the severability clause that says if some of this is unconstitutional, the rest of it can still stand. That's in almost every major piece of legislation, but it's not. So the court may decide if part of it's unconstitutional, it all goes away, or they may decide that the government would have to figure out how to make the system work without, for instance, the mandate, if the mandate is what they decide is unconstitutional. And we just won't know. And I'm not much of a guesser on the court. I can't even fill out a Final Four bracket that's accurate, so I certainly can't guess what 5 of these judges might decide. But I believe, I'm not a lawyer. I'm the first non-lawyer to serve in the Senate for Missouri in 40 years, but I am a history teacher, and I think that in the history of the country and in the Constitution, there is just not this kind of power in the Constitution for the federal government to decide what this bill decides. Though clearly we could go back and pass a bill, even if it was thrown out, that said under whatever circumstances you could stay on your parents' insurance longer, and other things that we might decide very much need to be part of the ongoing health care system.
So you're thinking that could happen. I know you said constitutionally it's not called for, but on the other hand, if it's something that people are getting now, I'm just guessing here, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that Republicans would not want to see that taken away from people.
Well, I believe that the fact that I wouldn't want to get into the argument that none of this is a good idea. Actually, it was my bill in the House that had the let kids stay on their insurance longer, so I thought it was a good idea. That's why I introduced it. I'm surprised that there's this great concern about cost because, frankly, most people under 26 don't have much health care costs, and they're largely uninsured. So if your goal here is to try to create access to insurance, you can do that, and mom and dad don't have to keep you on their policy if they don't want to. But I think that's the kind of thing that very likely might become part of permanent law, and the court might even say this really isn't affected by the mandate, so it can stand. I'm just not much what might happen. I'm not even of the belief yet that we have any reason to feel certain that the court will find this unconstitutional just because I believe it's unconstitutional.
All right. Well, Senator Blunt, by the way, before we go, I can tell you that it's okay if you don't fill out the Final Four very well because this year you can be forgiven. It's been crazy.
Exactly. Let me say this, too.
Sure.
Even if it's constitutional, it's still a really bad idea. And there are lots of things you can do that are constitutional that you shouldn't do. And so I don't want to get in a position that the court decides differently than I think it should, that the American people think, well, this fight is over because it's constitutional. It is a bad plan. We can't afford it. Let's go from that premise and do whatever is necessary to do the right thing for health care rather than the wrong thing.
Well, what's constitutional that's a bad idea?
Well, you could do all kinds of things that are constitutional that would be a bad idea. The president could and the Congress could declare war on somebody we shouldn't declare war on, but it would be constitutional. There are all kinds of things you could do that are constitutional that you and I wouldn't want to see the federal government do. I think this happens not to be constitutional, but even if it is, just because it's constitutional doesn't mean it's good. It's a great constitution, but it allows the people to make some true mistakes, and if the court decides this is constitutional, this would be one of the big mistakes in the history of the country to move forward with this bill if we decided to do that.
Senator Blunt, we appreciate you spending time with us this morning. Thanks so much.
You bet. Great to be with you. Thanks for what you do every day.